The rain in Seattle was relentless, tapping against the glass walls of the high-rise office like 1,000 impatient fingers. Inside, James stared at his reflection in the window. He was 45, a senior partner at a top law firm, wearing a $3,000 suit, and he felt completely hollow. The phone on his mahogany desk had been ringing for a minute before he finally picked it up. It was the nurse from Sunny Meadows Assisted Living in Ohio. His father, Frank, had taken a fall. He was okay physically, but the doctor said his memory was fading faster now. The dementia was claiming him, piece by piece. The nurse mentioned one thing that struck James hard. "He keeps asking for the 1965 Mustang, James. He keeps saying he promised to take you to the Grand Canyon." James hung up the phone and looked around his cold, modern office. He hadn't seen his father in 3 years. The last time they spoke, they had argued. James wanted Frank to sell his old house and the clutter of vintage car parts in the garage. Frank had called James a robot who had forgotten how to live. James canceled his meetings for the week, loosened his tie, and booked a flight to Ohio. When he arrived at the care facility, Frank looked smaller than James remembered. The strong hands that used to fix engines and build tree houses were now trembling. But when Frank saw James, his eyes lit up with a flicker of recognition. He didn't ask about James's job or his money. He simply smiled and said, "You're here. Is the car ready?" James swallowed the lump in his throat. The car, a cherry red 1965 Mustang, had been sitting in Frank's garage for 20 years, half finished. It was supposed to be their project, a father-son bond that James had abandoned for college and a career. Instead of explaining that the car was a rusted shell, James made a reckless decision. He signed his father out for a short trip. He drove straight to the old house, opened the dusty garage, and looked at the Mustang. It wasn't finished, but it was drivable. He spent the next 48 hours not sleeping, just wrenching, polishing, and fixing, pouring all his guilt into that engine. When he returned to the facility 2 days later with the rumbling V8 engine, Frank cried. Not the weeping of a child, but the silent, heavy tears of an old man who thought his dreams were dead. James helped his father into the passenger seat, threw a couple of bags in the back, and they hit the road. They weren't going back to the facility immediately. They were going to the Grand Canyon. The journey was a mixture of pain and beauty. As they drove through the vast cornfields of the Midwest and onto the open highways of Route 66, the silence between them began to break. Frank's mind drifted in and out. Sometimes he thought James was still 10 years old, warning him not to eat too much ice cream. Other times he was lucid, looking at James with piercing clarity. In a motel in Oklahoma, Frank sat on the edge of the bed and said, "I never wanted you to be rich, Jimmy. I just wanted you to be free. I worked at the factory for 40 years so you wouldn't have to punch a clock. But now look at you. You wear a watch that costs more than my house, but you never have the time to look at it." Those words hit James harder than any courtroom verdict ever had. He realized that in his chase for the American dream, the status, the money, the penthouse, he had lost the very freedom his father had sacrificed everything to give him. As they crossed into Arizona, the landscape changed to red rocks and vast, endless skies. The car overheated twice, and they had to sit on the side of the road, laughing as steam poured out of the engine, sharing cheap gas station sandwiches. For the first time in 20 years, James wasn't a lawyer. He was just a son. When they finally reached the south rim of the Grand Canyon, it was sunset. The world opened up before them, a chasm of purple, orange, and gold. Frank stood by the railing, the wind blowing through his thinning white hair. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes. "It's beautiful, Jimmy," he whispered. "It's just like I promised." He turned to look at James, his eyes clear for one final moment. "I'm sorry I was hard on you. I just missed you. Parents spend their whole lives teaching their children how to fly, but we break our own hearts when they actually fly away." James hugged his father, holding him tighter than he ever had. They stood there until the sun dipped below the horizon. On the drive back, Frank fell asleep in the passenger seat and didn't wake up. He passed away peacefully somewhere between Flagstaff and the New Mexico border, with the hum of the engine he loved vibrating through the seat. James didn't call the ambulance right away. He kept driving for a few more miles, tears streaming down his face, letting his dad finish the ride. Months later, James was back in Seattle, but the office was gone. He had quit the firm. He opened a small restoration garage for classic cars. It didn't make millions, but he was happy. On the wall of the garage hung a photo of him and his dad at the Grand Canyon, taken by a stranger just minutes before the end. Underneath it, James had framed the keys to the Mustang. He had learned the hardest lesson of all. You can always make more money, but you can never make more time. The American dream wasn't about the destination. It was about who was in the passenger seat next to you.